And this is Vikes Now. I am your host, Dustin Baker, coming to you from the kitchen. This time I graduated from the playroom. I thought this background would be a little bit less distracting or funky, depending on how you look at it. But yeah, we're going to talk about Za'Darius Smith today. That is the goal. That free agent signing fell out of nowhere, I think. I know there were hints from him with eye emojis and speculation from people like me that he'd probably end up there. But when it came to fruition, it's a big damn deal. So I'm going to go through several things for the impact of Za'Darius on the franchise, potential impact. That's what's on the docket for today. So the immediate implication of the Za'Darius move is what I talked about yesterday. It is reaffirmation of the Vikings' commitment to winning now. When Mike Zimmer, Rick Spielman were terminated, January 10th, the anniversary of Blair Walsh's miss, there was an expectation or temptation or flirtation that the team would rebuild, but the Vikings never rebuild. Alas, they're not doing it this time either. So when they extended Kirk Cousins about a week and a half ago, that was your first clue that said, hey, they're not rebuilding. I know he's not universally loved, Cousins that is, but he does keep a team in the mix. The guy throws 30 touchdowns at 4,000 yards per season like clockwork, and that doesn't grow on trees. So the new brand of leadership came in here and said, we like this roster, and we're sticking to it. On Tuesday, when Za'Darius signed, that should tell you everything you need to know about the team's commitment to being a playoff contender. Hopefully a Super Bowl contender. But if you needed any other sort of evidence, it was presented to you via cell phone alert that Za'Darius Smith was signing for the Vikings. You don't pay a pass rusher $14 million a year just for shits and giggles. They're doing it because they expect to contend for the division right now. There is no rebuild. There was never going to be a rebuild. The team is recommitting to the core group of guys, and it's brand new pairs of eyes looking at it and saying, we can win with this. So Za'Darius, above all else, anything I mention in the next 15 minutes is the fact that they signed him shows that they are once again all in for like the 7th straight year. I think since 2016, they've been a team that expects to win the Super Bowl. The next implication of this is I've searched high and low, tried to be objective, that they instantly formulate one of the best edge rushing duos in the world. I think the only one I would put ahead of them is the Chargers variation, because Khalil Mack was just traded there. Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, in their purest form, aged with Bosa, getting in his prime, you would probably say those two take the cake for the top duo in the league. But Smith and Hunter are not a distant second. They would be right there in the conversation, assuming that they're both in their pristine form, not injured. You've got Danielle Hunter with a neck injury background from all of the 2020 season he missed. And then last year, for like 17, almost all 17 games, Za'Darius Smith missed because of a back injury. So you're signing on for a duo of two dudes that have nasty injury history as of late. Now, Hunter, I know that there is debate on whether or not he's actually an injury-prone player. From 2015 to 2019, he was not. Bada bing, he was a very healthy football player. From 2020 to 2021, he has not been healthy whatsoever. He's missed 79% of all Vikings games. And that's why there was even the trade idea about him, or the rumor mill, was because can the guy stay healthy for 2 straight years? He's played 20% of football games. And if you're going to pay a guy 25 to 30 million bucks per year, you probably want him to be on the field. But if you can subtract all of the fear of injury, I mean, any football player can be injured, you have instantly, and we didn't have this last weekend because you had Wanham and Hunter before that, you have one of the best edge rushing duos in the league that wants to contend for a Super Bowl. The only thing that will derail this twosome is injury because there's a lot of it, and it's recent. It isn't 5 years ago that Smith tore his ACL in college. It's last year. Bad back, had surgery, got back for the playoff game. They lost, thankfully, and now he comes and joins the Vikings. But the only thing that I believe will topple the combination, Danielle Hunter, Za'Darius Smith, is injury. And that has to be announced because they've both missed ample time in the last year. And it's not to be a Debbie Downer, but it's just the truth. If there's any gamble, it's that. And I'm sure Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah knows that, but that will be the only thing that will make you say shit, is if they both get hurt, one of them gets hurt, because then you have to pivot, to DJ Wanham. And I'm going to talk about him for a minute. I know some of you are high on what he could have been. He had a handful of sacks last year. A lot of them felt like gimmies because of Zimmer pressure. But it's actually not a horrible thing that he gets to wait in the wings again. I don't know if you wanted him to start week 1, but I didn't. I didn't think that he was a sensible solution for a team that wants to reach the playoffs to be on the edge of a defensive line. Now, he could blossom like any player could in year 3, and then he could be great. But what you're hoping from him now, because he goes to the back of the pack, because Za'Darius is there, is that he takes an Everson Griffin-like path to stardom. Everson Griffin joined the Vikings the year that Favre turned into a pumpkin. That was 2010. And a little revisionist history about Griffin is that he didn't really get good until 2014. 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, he was meh. Didn't play a whole lot, wasn't a starter. Zimmer and Patterson get there, voila. Griffin turns into a powerhouse. And then I think he was probably in his peak form in 2017. There was a lot of Vikings in peak form that year. But Wanham can be like that, in theory, like Griffin. Some players, especially with that lower round draft stock, take time to mature. And we don't have patience for that, especially a quarterback for these young dudes. But Wanham doesn't have to be gangbusters out of the gate, because Griffin wasn't, and he became beloved and was a force for the Vikings for 6 seasons, and even teetered on coming back here. But I'll talk more on Griffin in a minute. On the injury part, they will happen. Whether it's Hunter for a game or 2, Smith for 7 games, they're going to happen. That's just the way it goes. If they both play all 17 games, then it's a dream come true. But that's why you have a Wanham or Kenny Wilkes or Za'Darius Robinson or Patrick Jones. That's why you have those depth players. So I would prepare for the worst, that Hunter and Smith will miss time. Hopefully it's not a lot, but then you do have dudes to pivot to like Wanham. So I wouldn't say Wanham is the odd man out. He is for a starter, but he can still be a part of the 3-4 Ed Donatel defense. All right, so the next thing is the idea that the NFC North, for some reason or another, is having a mass exodus of talent. We didn't know Za'Darius Smith would be the exit spot for him coming from the Packers to the Vikings. But between Allen Robinson, Devontae Adams, Akeem Hicks, Za'Darius Smith, there's a couple others that I'm forgetting. For some reason, these guys are just bolting. All of the Vikings opponents are getting weaker, and they did nothing to deserve it other than some rotten lack of Super Bowl history. But the NFC North is getting weaker, and the Vikings just signed a pass rushing tandem to get better. Those 2 items are fabulous, especially if you didn't want to rebuild and you wanted the team to compete with Kevin O'Connell in 2022. That is fortuitous. It's spectacular, because while divisions like the AFC West are becoming Herculean in terms of talent, pass rushers, and every quarterback in that division is at least good, and 3 of them are damn good. NFC North is doing the opposite. And it seems like the Vikings are the only team right now that isn't intentionally taking a step back. And with the Za'Darius move, they're getting better to perhaps finally take the division back from Green Bay. So as the NFC North is downsizing, the Vikings are upgrading. And we didn't really know that until Tuesday. It felt like it was just a status quo offseason. It really felt like Spielman was somewhere, in the janitor's room pulling strings. Of course, he is not, but all of the moves before Tuesday felt Spielman-esque. And this one, I guess in theory, Spielman could have effectuated, but you have an all-pro pass rusher, 2-time Pro Bowler, and Za'Darius Smith, who fell out of the sky, wants to be with the Vikings, takes pictures with former Packer coaches just to rub it into the Wisconsin team. It's like folklore-ish, storybook. The other unsung thing about the news of yesterday is this. So last offseason, when we kept squeezing the piggy bank, finding $14 million, it seemed like every time I went to go check the cap, whether it was June, July, or August, the Vikings had $14 million to spend. And it's wizardry. We like it. However, all of the deals that came out of free agency last year, besides Dalvin Tomlinson, were 1-year deals. And we were happy at the time because it was like, yeah, we got dudes, we got some depth. It didn't turn out to be very good depth. But this deal for Za'Darius is 3 years. Most NFL deals are really geared towards 2 in terms of the red meat. So you can consider Za'Darius as 2 or 3 years, but this isn't a one-hit wonder proposition. It's not going to be a little dinker trial of Za'Darius and then he's going to move on to the Raiders or something like that. It is 2 years. The management has strategically set this up where the Vikings have a renewed 2-year window. It started with Cousins. O'Connell evidently wants to win now and do some Stafford-like magic with Cousins. That's the goal. And so they've committed to Cousins for guaranteed money for 2 more years. Well, the wild coincidence, that's when Danielle Hunter's contract was scheduled to run out. And then, boom, they signed Za'Darius Smith yesterday for 3 years, which when you get down into it, feels like a 2-year deal for most of these semi-long-term ones. So the Vikings have renewed a window, and because we're so accustomed to 1-year deals for Bashaud Breeland, Xavier Rhodes, Sheldon Richardson, Patrick Peterson, all of the guys that we signed in the offseason defensively last year, it feels like a breath of fresh air that, hey, Za'Darius is here for 3 years, and it's guaranteed to be 2 that are relevant because we have this window that was unbeknownst to us until the last week was renewed by Kwesi Adofo-Mensah that they're going to take a 2-year crack at trying to win the Super Bowl, and they're going to fortify the roster to do so. And that's why they've kept so many core players, is because the guys that Spielman drafted, in Thielen's case, an undrafted free agent, Jefferson, Kendricks, Cook, Irv Smith, Hunter, they're all players that reasonably, with the right coaching, can get deep into the playoffs. And, O'Connell feels that I'm the guy that can take you to the Super Bowl. So the 3-year part of the Za'Darius deal is refreshing because we're so used to 1-year deals. The next item is improving on what last year was a bad defense, but somehow still got sacks. Every time I post a stat about sacks, I get clap back on Twitter that says like, "Oh, there's more to this than just sacks." I totally understand that. I look at pressure stats more so than I do at sack stats. But sacks are the fruition of quarterback pressure. So whether it was Zimmer doing fabulous things or just a hodgepodge of Vikings getting random sacks here and there, they ultimately happened, and those aren't bad. So when the Vikings ranked 2nd in sacks last year and 5th in sacks per play, that was mostly without Hunter and Za'Darius playing for the team that you hate. Now you have Hunter back and Za'Darius Smith coming back to a team that already ranked 2nd in sacks. So they have the credo to get to the quarterback, and it should only be enhanced when you have a gruesome twosome in Hunter and Smith. So I'm not going to sit here and say the defense was good. It was actually painstaking at times, especially in the final 2 minutes of halves. But the renewed sense of optimism is there because they already found ways to get to the quarterback last year. It should only be heightened in 2022. Winding down here with some of the implications, Anthony Barr, that's the elephant in the room. He's been mysteriously quiet the week and a half in the free agency. He probably isn't coming back. There was a theory. I've shared it. You've shared it. For 8 years, we thought, let's put this guy in the edge of a defensive line and have him go sack the quarterback. And, that's what he was drafted to do from UCLA. He seems like he has the toolkit and the athleticism to do it, but nobody ever does that. They're all smarter than us. And so we're never going to see Anthony Barr in his purest forms. However, there was a thought that if they didn't sign Za'Darius or they just had Wanham, that boom, you can line Barr up and do what fans have been preaching for years, give them a chance to go hunt quarterbacks. Probably not happening now. The way the defense will be set up, there will be 2 off-ball linebackers in the sense that it's Kendricks and Hicks, and those will be the linebackers that patrol the middle, and then you have the edges, presumably Hunter and Smith, and then up front you'll have Harrison Phillips, Dalvin Tomlinson, and probably Armin Watts, who showed that he could start in this league. So there's really not a spot for Barr unless you get funky and put Hunter or Smith on in the front of the defense on the defensive line. In theory, that could happen, but it seems like it's been so quiet on the Anthony Barr front since the O'Connell press conference that he's probably gone. And that's a big deal because he's been with the franchise for 8 years. He's beloved. I'll never forget, if that was his swan song, he had 2 plays last year that should have won football games. The first was against the Ravens. It was absolutely spectacular overtime play where he changed the dichotomy of the game, and the offense couldn't do anything with it. That should have been a moment to remember in Vikings regular season history, but it was choked away by poor play calling. And then against the Rams, probably the best game I've ever seen him play. And of course, that game was so weird. Stafford had all his interceptions, and the Vikings still didn't even have a shot in the game when they were turning it over left and right. Just more attributable to Zimmer's downfall. But the moral of the story is the implication from Za'Darius Smith signing with the team is Anthony Barr is probably gone. And on the similar note, there isn't a need anymore for Everson Griffin. That's very sad to say out loud. I think he still wants to play football. I think he tweeted that or did something to imply that he still wants to play. And hell, he was good last year before he had the encounter with the mental health. He was a great football player. He was one of those guys that was sacking quarterbacks and getting pressure. And it was needed once Hunter got hurt against the Cowboys. But I bring this up as a mini Vikings historian that it's notable that Everson Griffin probably isn't coming back because he's been with the team for over a decade. He had the hiatus to the Dallas Cowboys and Detroit Lions, where he actually played pretty well. They just didn't play him all that much. But this is probably the end of the road for Griffin, just like it is Barr. They're two Griffin's a pass rusher, and Barr just doesn't have a spot in the defense. And when you spend $14 million on a former Packer for all-pro dude, it lessens the need for an Everson Griffin type unless it's sheer depth. So that's the deal on Griffin. The final nugget is kind of broadly speaking is that I don't know how long you've watched the Vikings. I've watched them since 1996 when I moved to Minneapolis from Houston, Texas. And but as studying the Vikings course of history, 61 seasons, they are a emphatic 4-3 system setup. And 1 year in the 80s, they switched 3-4, quickly switched back. But when you're watching the Vikings week one, whether it's at US Bank Stadium, on your couch, at a road game, there's going to be fun, shock, and novelty of seeing a 3-4 defense because we are so ingrained, especially as of late, to see the Zimmer 4-3 that this is a brave new world. And you have Za'Darius Smith there to be the guy that ushers in a new era of Vikings defense. Maybe it'll be the missing link. Maybe that's what they need to do all along is play a 3-4 and stand Hunter up and, do glorious things. But it's the sheer, I guess, sticker shock or just the mere look and idea of switching to a 3-4 is cool. And then you couple that with one of the best pass rushing tandems in a preseason sense that we've seen since when? The 70s? I know Pete Griffin and Pete Hunter were pretty awesome, but consider this. The Vikings are switching to a brand new defensive coordinator, a brand new defensive scheme. They're getting their best player back in Danielle Hunter. And by the way, they're adding Za'Darius Smith. So all of that compiles to show that, this defense is going to be kind of fun to be a part of because we've never seen it before. So that is, in a broad stroke, all of the impact that I have or theorize for Za'Darius Smith on the Vikings. Yesterday, in some of the YouTube comments here, I told you guys to give me feedback, criticism, especially because I am a novice at this, and I thought switching here to this background would be a little bit better for the viewership. But if any part of this production shitty, me, the content, the look, the audio, just type it in there because I can fix it with experience. And that's how I did it with the podcast that I have with McKinney. I didn't know anything about that. And I just figured it out on the fly. That's what we'll do here. But I should be back tomorrow. It'll be a routine of Monday through Friday where I try to post up on here. But that is all I got. And skol, baby.